Hey everybody, welcome to Storytime. I have a very big special guest with me today. This is the Great Hambino. This here is a blood python, so aptly named because of the color of its scales. As you can see, it's got a lot of really cool reds all over its body, and this is a very, very big, girthy kind of snake. Now, a lot of times when we see pythons in captivity, we're used to seeing ball pythons, which are a pretty big snake in their own right. Those snakes can sometimes be anywhere between 3 and 5 feet, sometimes even a little more. Blood pythons also can get around 5 feet or so, but they are known for being much thicker, as you can see. Now, something I want to point out that I'm doing that I don't normally do with the snake is I keep putting them on my neck. I don't normally condone snakes on the neck, but I do that with this guy because of how big he is. Given with his weight and how they like to sit underneath leaf litter and logs and stuff in the wild, I'm giving him more surface area by letting him curl up on my neck and then get under my arm. So this is getting him to feel a little bit more comfortable. I also keep trying to give him something to hook his tail onto. As you can see, they actually use their tail like an anchor, and they will hook it into the different things. So it's a little bit more difficult to get this kind of snake comfortable on you, but it just takes a little bit more work trying to make sure it doesn't knock the microphone off or anything like that. But this is a very cool snake that we used to actually see a fair amount of them in the pet trade. We haven't been seeing as many lately. I don't think there's as many people breeding them, but they're starting to pick up on popularity again. Blood pythons are a Southeast Asian species, mainly known for eating things like rodents. They like to live in marshes, swamps, lowland forests. You'll find basically some varying information on like whether they like to be up high or not. A lot of websites will tell you that they spend most of their time under logs and in leaf litter blending in, whereas other sites will tell you that they'll sometimes be up in trees. They can climb a little bit, but as you can tell with his girth, it does make it a little bit harder for him to climb. He's going to want to be able to rest his big body on big solid surfaces. So it's, again, very, very cool, very interesting snake. Their patterns and their colorization is pretty amazing, and their temperament can be okay. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of an attitude, but if you have a captive bred one and you've held it for a very long period of time, well, then chances are that they're going to grow up to be a pretty good and handleable snake. Yes, Emma, we did get him out of his hide today. He didn't want to eat, but he did just shed. So with that happening, he's a little bit more on the lookout, looking for food. I figure next week he'll probably end up eating. And for those of you who haven't seen him at the store, that's because technically he's been in our quarantine, and he will be up and out of quarantine most likely this week, and you'll be able to see him on the sales floor. He'll be on the back rack behind the snakes, where we have our big 120-gallon tanks, and he'll be back there. So he's getting a little anxious, so I'm going to go ahead and get reading his story. This week, since it's getting to be Christmas time, we're going to start on Christmas-themed and holiday-themed books. So we're going to read Santa is Coming to Michigan. This is written by Steve Smallman and illustrated by Robert Dunn and Jim Mitchell. So this is Santa is Coming to Michigan with our big old Bubba here, who I've called the Great Hambino, but I'm sure everybody has a different name for him. All right. Well, boomed Santa, have all the children from Michigan been good this year? Well, mostly, answered the little elf as he hustled and bustled across the busy workshop to Santa's desk. Santa peered down at the elf from behind the tall, teetering piles of letters that the children at Michigan had sent him. Mostly, Santa asked, looking over top of his glasses. Yes, but they've all been especially good in the last few days, said the elf. Jolly good, chuckled Santa. Then we'd better get their presents loaded up. Even though the sack of presents was really, really big and the elves were really, really small, they seemed to have no trouble loading it into Santa's sleigh. Though how they managed to fit such a big sack into one little sleigh, even they didn't know, but somehow they did. Splendid, boomed Santa. We're ready to go. Not quite, Santa, said the little old elf. One of our reindeer is missing. Missing? Which reindeer is missing? Asked Santa. The youngest one, Santa, said the elf. It is his first flight tonight. I've called them, but just then a young reindeer strolled up munching on a large carrot. Where have you been? Asked Santa. The youngest reindeer was crunching so loudly that it was no wonder he hadn't heard the little elf calling. Oh well, never mind, said Santa, giving the reindeer a little wink. He took out his Santa nav and tapped in the coordinates for Michigan. This will guide us to Michigan in no time. With a flick of the reins and a jerk of the harness, off they went, racing through the sky. Ho, 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 laughed Santa. We'll soon have these presents delivered to the Great Lakes State. Santa's sleigh flew through the starry night, heading south and across the Arctic Ocean. On they flew in the wintry air over Canada. In the wink of an eye, the sleigh was flying above Lake Superior and on to Michigan. The youngest reindeer was very excited. He had never been away from the North Pole before. They had just crossed over Lake Huron when suddenly they ran into a blizzard. Snowflakes whirled around the sleigh. They couldn't see a thing. The youngest reindeer was getting a bit worried, but Santa didn't seem concerned. In 2 miles, said the Santa nav in a bossy lady's voice, keep left at the next star. But ma'am, Santa blustered, I can't see any stars in all this snow. Soon, they were hopelessly lost. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. Then through the howling blizzard, the youngest reindeer heard a faint ringing sound. Ding dong. He looked over at the old reindeer with the red nose, but he had his head down. Ding dong, ding dong. There was that sound again, like church bells ringing. The youngest reindeer turned around to look at Santa, but Santa wasn't listening. He seemed to be arguing with a little box with buttons on it. With a flick of the harness and a jerk of the reins, the youngest reindeer gave a sharp tug and headed off toward the sound of the bells, pulling Santa in a sleigh behind him. Whoa! Cried Santa, pulling his hat straight. What's going on? Then to his surprise, he heard the ringing sound. Well done, young reindeer, he shouted cheerfully. It must be the bells of St. Joseph's Church in Detroit. Don't worry, children, Santa is coming. Then suddenly, crunch! The sleigh hit something as it plummeted through the snow clouds. You have arrived, said the Santa nav unhelpfully. Finally, when the snow had died down and the clouds parted, Santa discovered exactly where they were. Stuck, right at the very top of the Renaissance Center. Everybody pull! The reindeer pulled with all their might until at last, with a screeching noise, the sleigh scraped clear of the Renaissance Center. Santa steered them safely over the skyscrapers, along Atwater Street, above Milliken State Park and Harbor, and down into Gabriel Richard Park. Luckily, there was no real damage done, but the packages had all been jumbled up. Santa quickly sorted the presents into order again. All right, said Santa. Thanks to this young reindeer, I know where we are now. Don't worry, children. Santa is coming. Santa drove his sleigh expertly from rooftop to rooftop all over Michigan, popping in and out of chimneys as fast as he could. There were big chimneys in Grand Rapids and small chimneys in Kalamazoo. He squeezed down thin chimneys on Mackinac Island and plummeted down fat chimneys in Traverse City. The youngest reindeer was amazed at how quickly they went. Santa never seemed to get tired at all, and it looked like the children of Michigan were going to be very lucky this year. But the youngest reindeer was starting to feel a bit weary and quite hungry too. In house after house, Santa delved into his sack for packages of every shape and size. He piled them under the Christmas trees and carefully filled up the stockings with surprises. In house after house, the good children of Michigan had left out a plate of cookies, a small glass of milk, and a big crunchy carrot. Santa took a little bite out of each cookie, a tiny sip of milk, wiped his beard, and popped the carrots into his sack. From Grand Haven to Sheboygan, from Ann Arbor to Petoskey, from Marquette to Menominee, and all the places in between, Santa and his sleigh visited every house in the UP and the Mitten. Santa delivered presents to Andrew, Allison, Anna, Arabella, Archie, Ashley. The list went on and on and on. Zach, Zara, Zeb, Zoe, Zybel.
Finally, Santa delivered the last present on his long Michigan list. "Great moons and stars," sighed Santa. "It's past midnight. My sack seems as heavy as ever. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone." Santa opened the sack to check, but it was full of juicy, crunchy carrots. Santa divided the carrots among all the reindeer. "Well done," he said, patting the youngest reindeer gently on the nose. But the youngest reindeer didn't hear him. He was too busy munching. Then it was time to set off for home. Santa reset his Santa nav for the North Pole, and soon they were speeding above Lansing, past Saginaw, and over all tall lighthouses through the crispy, starry night. "Ho, ho, ho," laughed Santa. "Merry Christmas, Michigan." The end. So there you have it. That's Santa's adventures trying to go all over Michigan, which he hit a random blizzard, which if you looked outside today, tends to happen in this state. And then it may randomly rain, and then it may randomly be warm. So you never really know what you're going to expect, which is kind of like our blood python friend here. Like I said, sometimes they can be a little mean, sometimes they can be a little nice. Sometimes they're dark red, sometimes they're crimson, sometimes they're orange. So just like wintertime in Michigan, you never know what you're going to get with a blood python. So I hope you guys learned a lot about our friend here, and I hope you enjoyed our book. We'll see you next week.